made the turn into March. Yep, and so it's we're kind of coming to the end of the season, but there's still plenty to talk about. This is Head for the Hills. It's an FYI podcast for Story Studio Network. I'm Dave Trafford. He is Glenn Crouter. And well, you've had a busy week. Never mind all the the fun, the skiing. You've had some challenges with the luggage, I understand.
Yeah, Dave, it's been a little challenge, but it's been fantastic. A little bit of a delay heading out of Toronto after that storm on Friday. Got to Kamloops, which is fantastic, wonderful airport, and all of a sudden, through Air Canada, my luggage disappeared to Calgary, so all sorts of weird things. But nevertheless, we're here. Sun Peaks was absolutely fantastic. I just love the place. It's like family there.
A couple things we just want to close the loop on. Last week we were talking to Brian Stemmel, and they were having great fun at Blue Mountain, and the weather, I think, actually was pretty good for the 24 hours. And all I could think of just before I was going to bed was Brian was still 3 hours away from doing his run at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, he was great talking last week, and so was Tara Lavo from Blue Mountain. And they raised $165,000 for just 24 hours at Blue. So that was from noon on Saturday to noon on Sunday. Again, 24 hours. They have teams. They ski through the night. Some weird times. And Brian was the guy who loved to ski at 1 o'clock in the morning, said it's so peaceful, tranquil, and everything. So he followed through. But $165,000. So congratulations to Michael and I, Subaru Canada, and everyone involved. That's a lot of money. If I'm not mistaken, that's probably a record, considering we were just coming out of 2 years of COVID. That's just a fantastic number.
Well, and I think, we've said this a lot on our programming. You don't have to do much to really make an effect in people's lives. And so a lot of people showed up and they did the least they could do. And look at the result you get is awesome. I mean, I'm sure that everybody probably dug in their pockets a little bit more deeply, though, as well, because, this kind of was a benchmark turn into something that resembles more routine, something more normal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been over 10 years since Michael's been running that. So it's a great mark. And the thing is, what I was talking to him about things, that because corporations have not had the opportunity to donate the last couple of years, especially individuals. So everybody, as you're right, everybody ended up a little bit more than usual. And that's why they raised $165,000 in just 24 hours. So that's a great number again. I was really impressed.
Well, you're listening to Head for the Hills. It's an FYI podcast for Story Studio Network, and this doesn't happen without the support of eWool. What an awesome... We're going to talk a little bit more about it coming up on the show. But if you want more information, just check out ewool.com. Turn the heat on and keep the fun going. All right, you had the opportunity last week to ski with the legendary Nancy Green Raine, and I thought, well, lucky you. I had the opportunity to interview her years ago. She and her family were here in town, and they were promoting something at the ski show in the before times when we had big shows like that. Anyway, the best part of talking to you this week is that she agreed to join us on the podcast this week. Nancy Green, thanks for being here. How are you?
I'm just great. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, you got up really early. I mean, we're recording this in the 9 o'clock hour here in Toronto, so we appreciate your getting up before dawn to join us.
Well, it's a nice time of the day.
It is. Having done morning radio for so many years, that was kind of that quiet place. But, I still like that sleep in, so I'm okay with that. For those of you just following along, Nancy won a gold medal in the Grand Slalom in 1968 and also won a silver, I guess, in slalom that year. How did that change your life?
Well, it was I'd had it as my goal for 9 years. And it's always nice when you reach a goal, and then, of course, you have to decide what do you do next. And I decided to retire at the ripe old age of 24, and it changed my life a lot. I always say that having won a gold and a silver, I know one thing, and that's that a gold is a million times better than a silver. Silver's nice, but gold is what you're aiming for.
So, and you know what? When you say that, it's funny. When I was a kid and watching those Olympics, and I remember after that seeing you more perhaps afterwards because you were the Mars Bar spokesperson. You were that they were sponsoring you, and I can remember thinking, oh, all of a sudden that introduced you to another or a broader audience, I would think.
Oh, for sure. I mean, when you're out there ski racing, you've got a hat and goggles on, and you're not live on television up close the way they are today. But when you're on a commercial, people can see your face and they see you as, life size, if you like, and it makes a big difference. But those were early days of commercials. They hadn't had a lot of commercials with athletes, so it was pretty interesting. And yeah, no, I had a great time. It was a whirlwind, especially that first few years. And then I got married and settled down and went back to skiing.
And in the course of all that, of course, we should point out the Lou Marsh Trophy Award winner. And I don't know where you start or you end this story, Glenn, because anybody who has recollections of Nancy Greene on the slopes, I think comes back to that whole idea of there was a positive feel and a vibe in the country at the time. We were coming into it was around our centennial. There was so much going on to be able to wave the flag in '68 like that. A little bit different vibe than we saw in Beijing.
Absolutely, 100%. And Nancy, you know what really impressed me, not only skiing, but also there's not many people in this day and age that can win medals in both disciplines. As you mentioned, you won a gold and then a silver as well, all at the same Olympics, because I don't really remember, maybe Jean-Claude Keely or someone like that. You'd certainly remember better than I, but to be able to be a specialist in both, and not to mention downhill as well. And if you take a look, when Nancy first broke into the circuit, she literally in the World Cup circuit, she upset all the Europeans because it was so European dominated. Then all of a sudden, Nancy, you rolled in and the world changed for you in skiing for Canada.
Yeah, it was heady times. And when I look back now, I realized it took a long time to be a sudden success. I mean, I was there for 9 years. I had come fifth in the World Championships as early as 1962. But, we didn't have the programs and the training, the support that the teams do today. And it just takes a long time. You have to really want to stick with it and keep on going. But back in those days, everybody did all the events. Pretty much everyone. There were some people who didn't do downhill, but it wasn't specialized the way it is today. And of course, today you've got all the other great snow sports too, like freestyle skiing and slopestyle and ski cross. And I mean, there's so many more opportunities if you want to compete at a high level to get involved.
We were talking to Brian Stemmel last week on the show, and he has the same sort of 15-year overnight success story as well. Yeah. So kind of flash on the scene. I think the first time you and I chatted was, it's got to be back in the 90s. And this was when snowboarding was becoming the thing to do. And clearly now it's part of the disciplines at the Olympic Games. But I recall you asked me if I skied, and I said I don't have the knee for it because I have no ACL in my left knee. And you said, well, why don't you just get it fixed? And I said, well, because I can still skate and I do my running and I'm fine, but I don't want the rehab, for 12 months or whatever it was at the time. And you looked at me and said, just go and get it done.
I had one knee surgery and I didn't have it until I was 50. So I was very fortunate when I was racing. I wasn't injured a lot. And, it is a part of our sport that's a bit of a negative. And so the conditioning and the fitness is really, really important. And fortunately now the surgeries are much better. But in, my day, if you had knee surgery, it could be career ending. For
sure. Yeah. Well, the Bobby Orr story is a great example of how
exactly.
that just, and for all of the attention that he got. When you talk about that, and Glenn tells me that you had him sort of huffing and puffing on the slopes last week. He was just trying to keep up with you. Do you ski to stay in shape, or do you have a fitness regime still that keeps you on your game?
Yeah, I try to stay really active. I try to do sports and activities that I like to do and that I enjoy doing, and socially. So sports, lifelong sports. My husband and I play tennis. I play golf. He plays golf a bit too, but we walk and carry our clubs, and I do a lot of hiking we've always stayed active. We've liked being outdoors, doing things. I'm not a person that really is drawn to the gym, but we have a very good fitness center just right, a couple hundred yards from where I live. So there's no excuse. And really you do have to pay attention to your fitness. And if you can do it all your life long, it makes it so much easier. but there's never a bad time to get started. Probably the best thing to do is just go outside and walk.
That's a key for a lot of people. And Nancy, we skied probably about 6 years ago, and I have to tell you, you haven't changed one bit. You're still your bubbly personality, your optimist, your outlook on life is so refreshing. It's amazing. I've talked to quite a few people at Sun Peaks this past weekend, and they say, "Is that Nancy Greene in the red jacket over there?" I go, "Yes." I said, "They go, do you think I can get a picture?" I said, "The lady is the nicest you ever want to meet." And not only are you a ski director there, I'd say you're an ambassador, and Al as well, your husband, who's the mayor of Sun Peaks. It was just a treat. Now, you did ski my butt off, I'll let you know. And I felt like I felt like a Sun Peaks sandwich, because I skied with you Black Diamonds in the morning, and I hadn't skied those in quite some time. And then we did a little trade-off with your husband, Al, who I loved as well. He came for lunch, and then he took me out and beat me up in the afternoon over in Morrissey. So between the two of you, I felt like a Sun Peaks sandwich, and I was exhausted by the day it was over. I kid you not. It was such a treat to ski with both of you, Nancy.
Well, we're so lucky because we live right on the slopes and we can get out pretty much every day, and not everybody can do that. So I don't expect people to have the same sort of leg stamina that we do, because we ski every day. It's just what we do, and it is fun. It's a great activity. You were pretty good, Glenn, I must say. I learned a long time ago. I learned not to be. When I think of the skiing around Collingwood, I was told, and I appreciate that you shouldn't be a vertical drop snob, because the skiing in Ontario as a place to get started is absolutely fantastic. And you can learn to ski there, and you can take it with you wherever you go. So you're doing just fine.
Well, it's funny because when I first started, I was doing the Ontario runs where you do a lot of turns. And then you looked at me a long time ago and you said, "What are you doing? You'll never make it down 4-mile runs, 5-mile runs, because you're going to exhaust yourself the first bit." And I was holding you back. And then you showed me, and just for people who wanted to go to the mountains, who ski basically in Ontario, here's a little tip that Nancy gave me, is that you kind of traverse the hill, you put the weight on one ski, and then you let the leg rest, and then you turn very nicely and carve around the other side. Nancy, that was a brilliant way of telling me how to say, stop skiing Ontario. You're now in the mountains. So ski like this. And I tell you what, I see people that go out there, and obviously a lot of people who ski mountains have that same technique. But from Ontario, we don't get long runs. So we want to get our money's worth. That's why we turn so many times.
No. And there's no doubt that Ontario skiers are very good at turning. And I mean, I watched the racers coming up, and I tell you, the programs for ski racing in Ontario are producing some really, really good athletes. The national team's never been so strong in slalom, and I think half of them are from Ontario.
Have you got your eye on somebody in there in terms of who we should be paying attention to, Nancy?
Oh, there's a whole gang of them. They're actually there's a girl from Collingwood, Ronnie Remy. She's doing really well, and Ali Nolmeyer from Toronto. She's doing super well. Of course, Erin Melzinski's been there for a while, and she's a great leader of the team. And then there's girls from across the country, BC and Alberta as well, and Quebec. So they've got a very, very nice team. And, there's 6-7 women who've placed in the top 10 this year in World Cup racing.
Nancy, is really nice talking to your husband, Al Raines, who was former head coach of the entire Canadian national ski team. And you obviously follow it very closely, both of you. But what I was talking to Al about, the future of skiing and how we can get, because when you go to Europe, these guys are rock stars. When I went to Wengen and saw the World Cup, when I went to Banff and saw the World Cup as well, and you went on that circuit. He had a great, interesting comment about how we can possibly attract the younger generation, because again, in Europe, they want to grow up to be these guys and ski, but not so much in Ontario. So Al had some great things to comment about how we can maybe develop our young athletes to get into be skiing, to be skiers and things like that. So I'm sure he shared that with you before as well.
There's lots of good ideas, but skiing is an expensive sport. Only the, people that have the spare change can really even get in it. It's not subsidized by the government. The government builds gymnasiums and swimming pools and tracks and soccer fields and hockey rinks, but it's private investment that builds the ski hills. and so they need to earn revenue, of course. So it's expensive to ski. I guess the best thing to do, though, is for those that do have a chance to ski, to work with them and have a way that the better you get, the less it should cost. Right now, as soon as you start to do well in ski racing, you have to travel. The distances are far and the expenses just add up and up. And I think there are parents out there that subtly encourage their kid not to get into competition because they're afraid they won't be able to afford to pay for them to go to the next level. So we need fundraising and we need good support from corporate sponsors, which fortunately the ski organizations are doing a pretty good job. But anyway, it's always a challenge. It was a challenge even back in my day. I grew up in a little town of Rossland, and when I was invited to go to Europe and train when I was 17 years old, everybody in my club went out. They knocked on all the doors in town and asked for donations and raised the money to send me to Europe. And that's how I got started. I'll never forget that.
Nancy, before we let you go, I'd be remiss if we didn't get your perspective on what's going on in Ukraine as it pertains to the international sport institutions and agencies and associations and so on, and how they're managing what's going on with Russia vis-a-vis the international sport. We see pressures on the young hockey players who have been banned by the CHL from Russia for the draft this year. We've obviously seen the World Cup be affected. I wonder where you are as not only an athlete. I mean, you spent time in the Senate, so this would have come across your desk had you still been sitting in the Senate when we started to talk about, taking sanctions and actions against Russia.
Well, it's absolutely horrible what's happening. It's hard to fathom that one man leading a country that is so powerful can inflict so much pain. And the Russian people are like everybody, I'm sure. But right now, the leader it's horrible what's happening. And I think everybody has to, punish Russia in all the ways they can, and that includes sport. And I'm happy to see that almost all amateur sports, so-called amateur sports, have withdrawn from the Russian playing field and are taking sanctions against Russians. And we're all going to, we just have to pray that it doesn't become a nuclear holocaust. It's terrible.
It so is true, Nancy. Just before we let you go, Nancy, I have to just mention the fact again. I was at Sun Peak 6 years ago when I pulled up in the car last Friday. I was totally blown away of the development you've got going. I know that Al's the mayor there, your husband, and you've done strategically planning. You're not just throwing a bunch of homes up and things like that. I was so impressed as well. Tell me, and moreover, your comment when we were on the chair really resonated. We're not building a resort. We're building a community. I put that quote in the paper in the Toronto Sun in my article yesterday, and I had a lot of reaction to it. And they said, well, what do you mean you're building a community? Can you just tell a little bit about Sun Peaks and the community that you've developed along with Al and continue to?
Sure. Well, the Sun Peaks Resort Lift Company, the development company that is in the area, they have the right to develop skiing according to the approved master plan. And that includes the right to develop the real estate at the base of the mountains. But early on, they realized that if this place is going to work, and especially to work year-round, you need to have it more than just the tourists and vacation visitors coming. You need people living here, working here, and settling down here. So we've, the community has been building for a long time. A municipality was formed, I think, over about 10 years ago. And so we have a great group of people that get together and fundraise. And ahead of the curve, we build things like a medical center. And we're now looking forward desperately to building of a school. Right now, we have 160 children that are going to school in a portable classrooms. But we need a proper facility. But because we are growing so fast, and because capital costs are limited from the provincial government, we're always behind. So we just get together and make it happen. And it's fun to see people pulling together, and it's become a great place to live. We have a lot of people who actually commute back and forth. They spend winters at Sun Peaks skiing, and then between seasons they travel, and they have a place in Ontario up in the beautiful lake country. And yeah, so it's interesting with the people here, and it is a community. Everybody cares for each other. When somebody has something happen, the whole community pulls together. When COVID hit, for instance, within a week, we had started we called the community kitchen because all the lift employees, most of them on low wages, were laid off and had no income. And we just formed an organization to help feed people that needed help. And yeah, those are the things we do.
I felt so welcome, not just from, the lifties, yourself, Al, everyone involved. And of course, have to thank Jenny as well for hosting me there. But I have to tell you that one quick story. When I was getting ready on Sunday, I went ice fishing, also snowmobiling up there. So there's so many other things to do than just skiing. But there was a class from your school. They had the Sun Peaks education. They had the school on. Here it is. One of their classes was snowshoeing. And I thought, wow, what a cool way of getting the kids involved. It's a class. It's one of their curriculum, I guess. And it was just so impressive. These kids had to be no more than maybe 5, 6, 7, 8. They all got their individual little snowshoes. They've got their suits on. They got everything. They're all lined up. It was the cutest thing I've ever seen. And considering the fact that they're at school, what a wonderful day at school that must have been.
Yeah, no, it's pretty magic. You know, when we do build a school, it won't be the same as it is now, because right now they have to ride a little ski lift, a beginner ski lift, to get to their school cluster. And, they do spend a lot of time outside because the portable classrooms, there's no gym, there's nothing other than little classrooms. So the teachers are very engaged. And in British Columbia, and I'm sure it's the same in Ontario, educators are finding that outdoor education, using the outdoors as one of your classrooms, is very valuable for children. And especially in this day where there's so many, it's been really tough with COVID because there's just so much screen time. To get outside is very, very important. And I'm pleased to see that that's happening. And I'm quite sure that the school that will be built here in the end will have outdoor education as part of its components.
Well, I can only imagine that here in this part of the world, we complain about snow days. Out there, every day would be a snow day for the kids, and that sort of changes the perspective.
I think the high school students have a 10-centimeter rule where they go to school a little later in the day on the powder days and stay a little longer. And I think the teachers are all for it as well. But they do get their hours in, and they are getting a good education, so we're proud of that.
The Honorable Nancy Green Raine, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for coming, and we really do enjoy having visitors that, really make that effort. It is a little harder to get to Sun Peaks, but it's worth it when you're here.
Great, Nancy. Thank you very much. And Nancy, your village, everything there is just such a wonderful spot to visit. I highly recommend it for families, for sure. I even said to Jenny that it's a romantic place for people to go for just a couple, because it's a foodie little village. You've got so many options to eat and so many options to really enjoy yourself and be part of that entire scene at Sun Peaks. So congratulations to you, and say hello to Al for me. And hopefully we'll see you guys soon as well.
Great. Well, thanks again for coming. Have a good day. Bye.
You and I, Glenn, I think sometimes we in this industry take for granted how cool it is to be able to do what we do, because we get to talk to people like Nancy Green. You name it. There's a long list of people I know that you've talked to just because of the industry you're in. Your time at Woodbine would have had all, but you talk to somebody like Nancy Green and you really kind of feel like, oh my, that there's a person in there. She really is engaging.
And she's the exact same person skiing, sitting on a chair for 23 minutes going up the hill. We nonstop. We're a couple little chickens back and forth. We just kept on chatting, and her husband Al was the same. Such a treat. What you hear and what you've seen is exactly what Nancy's like in person. And if people want to ski with her at 1:00, they can go ski with Nancy Green. Costs nothing. They usually have 20, 30 people that are lined up to go ski with her. So she'll take you out for the afternoon at Sun Peak. And that's the great thing. And just about the fact that Sun Peak is such a cool little place. Again, I say it's a foodie little town. It's a small little quaint European style village situated right in the middle of 3 hills. So every hill skis into the village and stuff like that. So what she has done, I was there probably 7 years ago, as I mentioned. We opened at that time. I was happy to be part of it. They opened up the medical center. Now they've got a school. And they continue to build and really make that a destination, not just a place to say, hey, I've come to visit, but a destination resort for families and couples. And I think it's a fantastic place.
Well, before we go, I want to get your take on, I know you use the E-Wool vest. And one of the things that I wanted to understand, for those of you just joining us, this kind of, it's a built-in heater, if you will, and it's got a battery pack. Can you easily change the batteries on that during the day, or can you double up the batteries? How do you make sure?
You only have one battery. It's a large battery pack in the back. It'll last you a good 7 hours, so you don't need to change it. It's not as if you're going to be, if you turn it up full tilt, it'll go down probably in about 4 or 5 hours. But kid you not, if it's that cold, you won't be out there skiing any more than 3 or 4 hours. That's the cool part about this. And as I said to Alan, the president and the founder, a couple of weeks ago, I said, I just wear the vest anyway. Sometimes I don't need the heat on, but the vest itself is so comfortable and so warm, and it's made for such an incredible material that you don't really need to have the heat all the time, even on cold days. And believe me, Dave, I've skied everything from -40, -45 down to just nice temperatures. Also, don't forget they've got the glove liners, which is a huge, huge part of keeping warm as well, because your hands are always touching the metal, whether it be your ski poles, whether it be on the chairs. So the liners go inside your gloves, so you can change gloves. You don't have to have that same glove. Like most companies just have a heater glove, so you're wearing that same one all the time. This one gives you the option. So you just slip in. It's really thin, so it goes inside any glove. The company is fantastic. And as they mentioned, there's going to be possibly a sock coming out as well, a very thin sock, which I'm really looking forward to as well.
Mm-hmm. ewool.com if you want more information on that. Okay, before we go, what are you up to this weekend, and where are you headed to next weekend?
I'm at Whistler right now. I just checked in last night. We've got 4 days of sunshine coming up. Got a little bit of new snow. Excuse me. And it's, of course, the largest ski resort area in all the country, and certainly rivals many in the States as well. So I'm here for 4 days. We'll actually have someone on next Thursday. On Friday, we'll have them on next week to talk about what's going on at Whistler. Some real interesting things. They're apps. I was sitting with Tanya Sears last night. She's development for media, travel representative, and she was telling me that the different cultures that are now skiing, that you can come here, and they're one of the hot markets is Mexico. So they have Spanish speaking instructors. They've got Chinese, they've got Japanese. So that's unusual. I've never really heard that before. So they're adapting right off the bat to the different I could say cultures coming in, ethnicities, and they're really noticed. So they've got 200 instructors that and many of them are bilingual and have other speaking languages. So it really is something that I was really happy to hear that, because we welcome all people, everyone, race, creed, color, doesn't matter. Come and enjoy the best winter sport you're ever going to have.
Stay safe, have fun, enjoy that sun, and we'll look forward to talking to you next week, Glenn. Thanks for being here.
Thanks a lot, Dave. That was great. Thank you.
All right. This is Head for the Hills, an FYI podcast for Story Studio Network. I'm Dave Trafford, and we'll talk to you next week. Enjoy the slopes.